friends, that we all want to be friends of the library. It's $10 or more. It brings all of these programs to us, so which is wonderful. And we're so lucky that our library is continuing to do a blend of in-person and Zoom. A lot of libraries went away from that, so we thank the board for continuing to do that, and for all of you guys who are friends who make it possible to pay people like Shelly and bring him to us all the time. So it's only that way. It's only because of us that we get such quality entertainment. Not that we consider you entertainment, Shelly, but still. So just a couple of things before we start. On the 13th, which is Sunday, we have the Broward College Jazz Combo is going to be at the library in person, and that's from 2 to 3, which is really pretty cool. On Monday, not that we're saying anything about the foreign movies, but on Monday, fun time at 12:30 at the library is Wicked, so that ought to be a lot of fun. And don't forget, on the 22nd, Tuesday the 22nd at 1:30, Linda Levin, we love Linda Levin, will be there to discuss Black Cake for the book discussion group. And the Hollywood Historical Society will be there the following Sunday, and they're going to be discussing the hurricane of 1928, and that's at 1 o'clock. And the best thing about the Hollywood Historical Society is not only do you learn something about our community, but the cake is always wonderful. So anyway, and that comes from a very generous donor who sends that. So anyway, Shelly, want to take it away and take us into another territory?
Sure. Thank you, Jackie. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us again. And tonight we're discussing a terrific film, terrific Brazilian film, The Second Mother, or it's known in Portuguese, Que Hora Se La Volta. I hope you all enjoy, which means when will she be back? When will she be back, or when will she be home? This film comes to us from a very talented director. Her name is Ana Muiler, a well-respected Brazilian director and screenwriter known for her character-driven narratives exploring social dynamics and family relationships in contemporary Brazil. The film's premise centers around Val, a live-in housekeeper in Sao Paulo, who you've seen has dedicated years to caring for her wealthy employers and their son, Fabino. Meanwhile, her own daughter, Jéssica, has been living elsewhere. The story really gets going when Jéssica calls her mother after 10 years, apparently, hasn't seen her in 10 years, after a number of years, and arrives to prepare for her university entrance exams. And her presence starts to shake up the established order of the household. What I found particularly interesting, and what really adds a layer of depth to the film, is that The Second Mother was actually inspired by the director's own personal experience. She mentioned that her relationship with the nanny who helped raise her son while her own child was in her hometown was the nanny's child was left in her own hometown. This was a key inspiration. Knowing this personal connection really helps us understand the authenticity and nuance she brings to the story about the complexities and inequalities of domestic work in Brazil. Concerning her key core themes that really stood out in the film, one of the most prominent, I think, is the way the film portrays classic conflict and social inequality in Brazil. It's not always overt, but it's woven into the fabric of everyday interaction. The unspoken rules about who belongs where and how people should behave. Another powerful theme is motherhood and sacrifice. We see this so clearly in the contrast between Val's role as a surrogate mother to Fabino and her somewhat strained relationship with her own daughter, Jéssica. It really makes you think about the difficult choices many working class women have to make, leaving their own children to care for others. And I'm sure you all had different reactions to this situation and how you interpreted her relationship with both Fabino and Jéssica. Interestingly, as I said, the original Portuguese title translates to "What time will she be back?" It immediately sets a tone, especially from the opening scene. It sets a tone of waiting and perhaps a longing for someone's return. We see this play out right from the opening scene where we see Val diligently working. She's chasing Fabino around the pool. We have no idea who she is yet. She could be an aunt, she could be her mother. We have no idea. But she then gets a phone call after she puts him in the pool, and that pool is another pivotal place. It seems like when is she coming home would refer to Barbara. As Pino says, when is my mother coming home? And now we know she's not his mother. And she's talking to someone on the phone and saying, I miss you, and I love you. And okay, where is this going is left for us to find out. But it will take on a deeper meaning. When will you be home takes on a much deeper, more existential meaning in relation to Val and her own daughter, Jéssica. The film also shines a light on privilege and entitlement, particularly through the characters of Barbara and Carlos, the employers. They seem kind on the surface, but as the story unfolds, we see how deeply ingrained their sense of privilege is and how resistant they are to any real challenge to their status. Carlos, in particular, also embodies a certain patriarchal entitlement. And I am sure you observed this in his behavior at certain moments in the film. Then we have the generational change in aspirations embodied so strongly by Jéssica. She represents a new generation in Brazil that isn't willing to simply accept the subservient roles of the past. Her ambition and her view of herself as an equal really clash with the established dynamics of the household. I am sure you all had different views, as I've already gotten, of Jessica's approach. And whether you found her actions justified and what she represents for the future. These will be topics that I hope you'll address later. Finally, the film uses space and boundaries in a really interesting way. The layout of the house itself, who uses which rooms, who eats where, even who uses the pool, becomes a powerful metaphor for the social divisions at play. What did you know? What you notice about the space in the film is important. How did it contribute to your understanding of the characters and their relationships? Concerning the performances, which I thought were all very good, and the two basic performances of the two women, the mother and daughter in the film, won awards at Sundance. They won awards at many festivals around the world. Regina Casé as Val, I thought was just terrific. She's a big star in Brazil on television. She has her own shows. She does film, and she truly embodies Val's warmth and dedication to Fabino, but also that internalized sense of knowing her place. I thought she subtly revealed Val's growing frustrations and eventual awakening. So she comes off both sometimes endearing, and sometimes she could be a little cloying. Her loyalty is touching, but her adherence to old rules can be frustrating when Jéssica begins to challenge them. And then there's Camila Mardila as Jéssica, who gave a powerful breakout performance. She won the award at Sundance alongside Cassie. She really captured Jéssica's intelligence, her confidence, and her ambition. She doesn't come across as being malicious, just as someone who refuses to see herself as inferior. If you remember, she remarks to her mother, I'm not worse than them. I'm not better than them, but I'm not worse than them, is what she says to her mother in a response. You could feel the weight of her generation's aspirations and perhaps even a bit of understandable resentment towards her mother character and even Barbara, whose performance Karine Tellez as Dona Barbara effectively portrays the anxieties of the lady of the house. She maintains this veneer of kindness, but you can see her discomfort and even her passive aggression escalating as Jéssica crosses those invisible lines. There is also a moment when the coffee set gift from Val that really speaks volumes about her subtle snobbery, especially when she expresses her annoyance at Jéssica swimming in the pool. and later telling Val that she saw a rat in the pool. Lorenzo Mutarelli as Dr. Carlos. Well, he starts off seemingly more relaxed in the house. We see him sitting there. He doesn't seem to care about anything. But his character begins to take darker turns as he develops an inappropriate interest in Jéssica, going so far as hugging her not too politely, being loosey-goosey with his hands when they visit the construction site, or when he goes off the rails entirely by asking her to marry him and passing it off as a joke. And when he mentions to her that his money doesn't come from Barbara, that it's his inherited money. And he remarks that he's the DJ and everyone dances to his tune. It really highlights the potential here when we see him for exploitation within these power imbalances within the film. And finally, Michael Jolsas as Fabino. He represents, the child raised by two mothers, and he clearly has genuine affection for Val, but he's also a product of his privileged upbringing. Interestingly, he seems to accept Jéssica more readily as an equal, like when he invites her to swim in the pool, when he and his friend invited to swim in the pool, and he gets closer to her when he asks, when they have that private conversation at night by the pool, and they're smoking marijuana, and he asks her if she's a virgin, and she laughs at him and looks at him, and he says, "What about me? Do I look like?" And she says, "Yes," and he says, "Well, I am." They have this little intimate conversation, and Jéssica says to him at that point, "Do I look like a rat?" When he says to her, "There was a rat in the pool," and she jokingly says, "Do I look like a rat?" And he says, "I don't understand what you're talking about." He doesn't get the subtlety. He doesn't get the subtlety. But he is the other side of this class divided generation. But he also represents a change by his willingness to be friendly with Jéssica. Briefly touching on the film's production, there's the setting itself. That beautiful mansion in Sao Paulo, it's in the what is known as the Morumbi district, which is a very wealthy district. It reminds me of you had a house that was a main character in the film Parasite a couple of years ago, which won the Academy Award. And here too, you have a house that has twists and turns, has rooms, has a downstairs, and we're always wondering what's going on behind closed doors. And feels like a character in the film. The sheer spaciousness really emphasizes this class divide, the bright open areas for the family versus Val's bedroom. When opening the shutters doesn't let in light so much as it make her feel like she's in a prison, because you see the bars. When she's talking to Jéssica and opening up the shutters, you see bars. It's like she's in a little prison downstairs. The architecture contributed to the themes of separation and boundaries within the film. If you remember, we see Val in the kitchen. You only see that narrow doorway going into the dining room, and all we see is one person sitting at the head of the table. It's almost looking at things from her point of view. The cinematography is also worth noting. It feels very fluid, naturalistic, almost observational, as I just said, as if we're just a fly on the wall in certain cases. The way the camera frames the characters often emphasizes the power dynamics themselves, like placing Val physically lower or capturing Jéssica boldly entering spaces she wasn't supposed to, taking things just willy-nilly. I hope you really appreciated the film's visual style. And even the smaller details, like Val's personal belongings, the family's decor, and symbolic objects like the coffee set, as I mentioned, or Fabino's ice cream. Fabino's ice cream all subtly reinforce the film's themes. The sound design also contributes to the realism, relying mostly on sounds within the film's world. In fact, the only time we actually hear music that's on the soundtrack, other than when it was played at the party, is when we see Val splashing in the pool towards the end. It's the only time we really hear a musical soundtrack. Some of those key scenes, the key scenes that really resonated especially with me, and I'm sure with some of you, was Jessica's arrival and her immediate choice of the guest room instead of the maid's quarters is a powerful moment, immediately signaling her refusal to adhere to the expected social hierarchy. What were it's, and I'm sure you had some reactions to this, but I thought it was terrific. Here she comes in and she sees them sleeping. Now you have to remember something is when she talks about her education, she said there was this wonderful history teacher that taught them how to think. And obviously he was very critical of society, of the society as it is, because it's coming out of her. A lot of critical thinking is coming from her about the class structure and why her mother has to deal with this, and why even the structure of the service class and how they're put down, all these class divides. And she is really expressing herself based on her education. So we see all of this. The swimming pool, that's such a potent symbol of class divide, as I said. When Val says to her strictly, a strict rule, no, you can't go in there. That pool is not for you. You don't go swimming in that pool. Obviously, Val never went in the pool. And if you remember at the beginning, she doesn't go in the pool with the child. She puts him in the pool. It's versus Jessica's casual acceptance when the boys throw her in and she's having fun with them in the pool, throwing the ball around. And we get Barbara's horrified reaction to her being in the pool. She says, "I hear another voice. Who is that? Is that Jessica?" And then realizes she was swimming in the pool and has the pool drained because she was in it. And then there's even something simple as meal times. The initial scenes of Val eating separately in the kitchen or on her feet versus Jessica sitting at the family's breakfast table or joining Carlos for lunch. Carlos makes her his personal guest, and he's giving Val orders, and Jessica's sitting there enjoying the lunch with him and having a conversation. Each of those things creates a palpable tension and forces the employers to confront their own unspoken rules when they see her defying them. And who can forget, as I said, the ice cream? Jessica just casually eating Fabino's expensive brand with first with Carlos, and then later on in the kitchen when Barbara walks in and sees her eating the ice cream, saying, "Now I know what's happening to Fabino's ice cream." She throws the comment at her. It really highlights what's going on, the absurdity of the boundaries she's trying to maintain. It's the absurdity of the boundaries that she's trying to maintain, Barbara. And then there's the coffee set, Val's thoughtful gift, and Barbara's barely concealed disdain. As someone noted, I've seen Val's subsequent struggle to fit the pieces back into the box or into the plates. She's sitting there trying to figure out what goes where. How does the thermos go fit onto the tray? She has to take it's almost as if it's a metaphor for the impossibility of maintaining a rigid social order. It's a metaphor for everything that's going on in the film. It just doesn't fit anymore. The social order doesn't fit. I'm sure we all have thoughts on that, but that's what's happening in Brazil. And let's not forget the uncomfortable scenes with Carlos and those inappropriate advances. They really expose a darker side, as I said, of the power imbalance and how perceived social inferiority can be seen as an invitation for exploitation. In other words, she's a servant's daughter. He could take advantage, especially when he gets that touchy-feely. And then he laughs it off when he asks her to marry him. It's only a joke. And she nervously laughs about it. And think about Val's reaction after learning that Jessica passed her exams with high marks. It's like unbelievable. The same way it was unbelievable, like when she found out, why is she here? She wants to go to university. Oh, well, that's nice. She passes it off thinking she'll never get in there. And here we see Fabino failing to get in, and she gets in, or at least she passes the first exam with high marks. And it's interesting again to watch what happens. Fabino leans on Val at first. She's hugging him, she's kissing him, telling him it'll be all right. And when he sits down with his mother, she's cold. She just sits there, and then she says, why do you hug Val and you don't hug me? Well, we've seen why. We've seen why. It's like, it reminded me years ago, for those of you who took psychology classes, if you remember, there was a famous psychologist named Harry Harlow, and he did experiments on motherhood, on children, and what they did was he did it first with monkeys, okay? And he gave monkeys terry cloth towels, and he put in the terry cloth toweled monkeys. In other words, little monkey models in terry cloth, and he put in wire hair, or what we call wiry monkeys, into a cage. And the monkeys that had the wiry ones became very distant and sat in corners just sucking their thumb, while the ones with the terry cloth mothers gravitated towards them, slept with them, rubbed them, felt comfortable with them. So it was often, and then he spread it to human beings and talking about how cold mothers affect their children. It was a personality thing. Anyway, and then, getting away from this for a moment, there's the really significant revelation that comes quite late in the film, when after Jéssica confesses her feelings of abandonment by Val, and saying, and ignoring the fact that Val sacrificed for her, that Val confronts her with the photo of a young boy and asks her, who is this? Who is this? This revelation is so profound, bringing the cycle of maternal sacrifice full circle. Val left Jéssica to be raised by others so she could work. Now Jéssica has had to leave her own son to pursue her education. That could now it could potentially break that cycle. What happens? It really underscores the systemic pressure that limit choices for working class women in Brazil, because many of them have had to leave their children behind to take care of other children. It also reframes Jéssica's character. Her ambition isn't just youthful aspiration. It's the fierce determination of a young mother fighting for a better future, not only for herself, but for her son. Her drive to succeed in the exams becomes even more critical, and even her earlier anger and resentment towards Val take on a new light. She now understands the pain of separation from a child. When Val faces her down, she breaks down in tears. She said, I didn't know what to do. She knew what she had to do, what she was driven to do. For Val, this news was incredibly impactful. It forces her to see her daughter not just as the child she left behind, but now as a fellow mother facing similar impossible choices. It likely evokes a mix of shock and empathy, potentially creating a deeper understanding between the two. While the ending has a sense of hope with Val leaving, quitting her job, and Jéssica succeeding academically, the existence of George adds a layer of realism in the film. It reminds us that escaping deeply entrenched social inequalities is a long and complex process. And finally, with Val's decision to quit and support Jéssica, insisting that she bring George to live with them so Val can help raise her grandson, which gives her a second chance at motherhood. Gives her a second chance at motherhood, not only for her daughter, but for her grandson. It represents her own personal liberation in a way. It's that glowing light we see at the end. It's her asserting her own worth and taking a step toward mending her relationship with Jéssica on new terms. And in referring back to the title, what time will she be back, now carries that poignant double meaning. We heard Jéssica say it out on the terrace when they were arguing. All the times I kept saying, when will she be back? When will you be back? And you never came back. Beyond the literal question that Fabino asked as a child about his own mother, it's also the question of Jéssica. And it becomes a metaphor. It can represent the return of dignity and perhaps a more equitable future for the women like Val. For women like Val. In conclusion, and her stepping into the pool was really a pivotal moment in the film also. And it was inspired by Jéssica. It was inspired by Jéssica. Now she goes into the pool and she's splashing around and calling Jéssica and telling her what she's doing. It's almost like a baptism for her. She's regenerated. She's now free. She's free. And when she quits, she's not going to tell Barbara, well, I have a grandchild, but she says, it's something I have to do, take care of my daughter. In conclusion, it's a really powerful film because it avoids easy answers and doesn't paint anyone as a complete villain or saint. I mean, everybody's flawed. We see flaws, believable characters on all sides of the class divide. It manages to balance the social critique with humor and also a deep sense of humanity. The film suggests that while these old structures are deeply ingrained, there's a new day dawning, driven by the aspirations and confidence of the next generation, represented by Jéssica, who are challenging, people like Jéssica, who are challenging the status quo that has existed for so long. I want to know your thoughts on the film. What are some of the key takeaways that stuck with you? And any questions or other observations you'd like to share? So let's get into it. Who would like to go first? Anybody? Nobody has any thoughts on this film? Arlette, go ahead, and then Karen.
Well, I have thoughts, but like I said, I've been to Brazil since the 1970s, and the caste system does exist. And in the 80s, you saw more of an evolving middle class in their society, okay? The thing is that broke my heart is that my relatives were, I considered middle class. My immediate relatives were middle class, but they had a maid. But when she left for a 3-day holiday to visit her children, it was 9 hours by bus going and 9 hours coming back. But I took my son there for his 18th birthday. I took him to Rio and then Sao Paulo. When he and his older cousin came in at 9 o'clock in the morning, that maid was there. Oh, would you like to have eggs or chicken? She was right there on time. She would never miss a moment to do what she had to do, whether it was cooking. And I found it strange. We always ate in the dining room, okay? The only time we ate in the kitchen was when the maid was away visiting her children. I found that very, very strange to be, for me anyway. But my other relatives, they've passed away, but their children and their self-made millionaires have a maid. They even have a chauffeur. When the children were driven to school, they would have the children in one car and the guards were behind them in another car taking them to school. That's how society, the caste system is so different there. Very, very strict. Yet I remember in the 70s, we went to a beer hall and with my cousins and we were dancing with everybody. We didn't look at class distinctions. We were just busy dancing the samba with different people. And I was very, very surprised at that. And the Brazilians, as poor as some of them are, they always seem to be happy, always a smile in their face. And they suffer. Believe you me, they suffer. To this day, the middle class, I've never really asked my cousin how it is compared to the 80s, the middle class. But there is a very strong class distinction. And I understand the thing about the pool. They had relatives that had a pool, and they had a very similar situation. And believe it or not, they did call the pool guy to empty the pool. They didn't say the rat. They had some other kind of an excuse. So it does happen. It exists even today.
Well, it's a little different today. I mean, there has been more of a breakdown of the system because of this younger class that's been coming up, this younger generation. And there are several films. There have been a number of films made about this particular subject in different. This exists not just in Brazil. It exists in Argentina. It exists in Chile. It exists
In
in
India.
Peru. Well, we confine ourselves to South America because that's where this film comes
Yeah.
from. But it exists in other areas of South America. And there is another remarkable film that deals with this subject, and it's called The Maid. And it's much more of a realistic film, almost neo-realism, if you will, in the way it's handled. And they're the main character. We see the main character. And again, yes, they do live far from where they come from. They do have to travel a great distance. They do leave children behind. They leave husbands behind. They leave family behind. It is a very difficult thing that they go through. But this is, there is a younger class who's getting more educated and making it on their own. I mean, this is happening around the world. Yes, it's happening in India. It's happening in South America. It happens in a number of places that the service class is finally, having children that are rising above the class. So we see that. Thank you.
I just want to say I loved Val in the swimming pool. It was a rebirth. All of a sudden, it's a rebirth. And she's so jubilant. And you can just feel the love that she was experiencing and just coming above it all. I thought it was a wonderful film. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Karen, I saw your hand, and then Susan. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay. I like let me see. I think let me check and see if I'm okay.
You're on.
Okay, good. I really liked the movie a lot. I thought it was, very informative to see that sort of thing. But also my favorite character was Jéssica, because she's the one who brought the ideas. And I think that's what the teacher had provided, was ideas on how things didn't have to be the same as they had been. But and then how she, even showed she couldn't convince her mother, and couldn't believe her mother, accepted all of that. But in the end, her mother ended up following her. Val ended up following her, and the chain was going to be broken because they were going to bring the little boy, and Val was going to help to look after him. So I think they were going to build a nice relationship in the family.
Yeah, it was a hopeful film. I mean,
Yes.
it ends on a hopeful note because, we see what's happened here as, yes, Jéssica upsets the balance. She represents a number of youth that are upsetting the balance. Fabino himself may upset the balance when he returns from Australia. He's already on his way.
Right.
So, in terms of his acceptance and understanding. So who knows where he'll wind up. Or he'll leave South America altogether. He may not want to come back to Australia, judging by Barbara's behavior. Anyway, thank you, Karen. Susan Pauls.
Hello. I like the film a lot. The only thing that bothered me about the film was the lack of the backstory of Val's marriage and how and why Jéssica was brought up by her ex-husband or her lover, or you didn't really know the father and the stepmother and so on. It was sort of hinted at, and things you'll never know, she kept saying. I found the film to be part of a genre of these upstairs, downstairs kinds of films, with the interaction between the people downstairs, like Val and her friend, the other housekeeper, and the guy that opened the door, and so on, and the relationships between the upstairs people, and then the relationships intertwining those. There were many, many Asian films that we have seen where the young maid comes in and either the gentleman she's taking care of falls in love with her, or the father or something. So I was wondering who she was going to marry at the end, but it did surprise me in being much more realistic about the possibility of marrying the rich employer. It wasn't that cliche. Jessica was not there to meet the rich employer. There's also the American South. I mean, when you look at The Help, same kind of story. When you look at, let me see, those are the only two I could think of the names of the films, but there are many. And there's always a lecher, and there's always a woman who's blind in her arrogance about, so it's kind of a cliche story with cliche characters, but in this particular movie, I felt that it was much more realistic. Because it went through the minutia of her life, the washing the cups, the perfection, the ice cream, the which spoon, every little detail. And I thought that was very realistic to show her capabilities. She was a very strong woman. She was amazing, but she's loving this young boy who sleeps with her and adores her, and her daughter, she doesn't even know. The sadness is incredible.
Yeah, that's the contrast in the film. It's a unique contrast in the film, but a very real one. You know, it's and as I often say, you know, cliches aren't necessarily a bad thing.
Oh,
In this case, certainly not. You know, because the cliche is the truth. In this particular case, the cliche is the truth. You know, someone like Val represents thousands of women like her, if not more. You know, young people like Jéssica, again, the ones you point out, Barbara's arrogance, Carlos's lechery, which is entitlement, is the male entitlement of that class. All of these things are very real. And the way she handles them in a realistic way, which I thought was interesting, especially from a cinematic point of view. The cinematography I thought was terrific. The way she dealt with the spacious house, yet with Val, everything was closed in. Everything was closed in. She really didn't have far to turn. And we see that within the context of the cinematography. As far as the backstory, I think, you know, at the beginning, when she's talking to Barbara, who's really not listening, is half listening, she says to her, well, that rat, you know, she called her husband basically a rat. He was, you know, I got rid of that curse, is what she said. I got rid of that curse. But yes, he had some doing in her upbringing, obviously, because she wasn't present. And whoever this Sandra was, if she was his second wife, lover, whatever she was, but she took care of her. You know, but it seems like she got, the backstory for Jéssica was she got an education, but she lived in an area where obviously morals were a little looser. Or, well, what can I say about a younger generation? You know, she got pregnant. We don't know, we didn't learn what her relationship is with the person she got pregnant from. That would have been interesting to know. Is he a guy, you know, is obviously, though, I think maybe that person doesn't exist anymore, and not dead, but just didn't want to claim anything, because she says, bring George here. So if she's going to bring George, there's no other person, there's no George Sr. coming along with him. So I felt that within the context of things. So I don't know, but it leaves those questions. I think she uses shorthand in that case. You know, leaves it to us to think about, you know, what happened previously. But we know the important thing is we know she had to leave to do this. And she left her daughter, and she said, I kept calling. She says, yeah, you called. You were like some rich woman that brought me toys. I had no idea what you were doing in Sao Paulo. As a kid, she didn't. And then when she, you know, when we understand that when she stopped talking to her, it was obviously when she had the kid. You know, she didn't want to deal with her. And that made sense to me. That made sense to me. So, but thank you for a lot of the things you said make a lot of sense within the context of the film. Marilyn.
Had to unmute myself. I really like the movie. I think there were so many themes. We could have a 3-hour discussion on the themes, and yet I found that it was very non-judgmental, which was very lovely to see. And but one of the things that I really thought when I broke it down, for me, it was the diversity between Barbara, who wanted to maintain the status quo and did not want to move forward like the hands of a clock. She wanted that clock to stand still and it's not just Brazil. I mean, it's everywhere. It's universal. And Jéssica, to me, was the hands of the clock are absolutely moving forward. And the discrepancy between the mindset of Barbara and Jéssica, to me, was a major thing. And it has to really go towards tomorrow because you can't move backwards. And so that to me was a very powerful theme. And the other thing also was the difference between Jéssica and Fabi. How do you pronounce
Fabino.
Okay, so one of them was definitely rescued and enabled and given privilege and given entitlement and yet not enough to make him really accountable and want to succeed and driven. Not at all. He couldn't pass his exam. Nothing ever pushed him. He was not given that kind of direction. The mother was cold, but she didn't give him the guidance and the direction she needed, even though she was cold. A cold mother could make your child really see where you want your life to go, which I didn't see, and where he got his whatever you want from Val did not give him that guidance and direction, but it gave him security. Security doesn't help you pass exams. On the other hand, you get Jéssica, for me, the way I saw it is you got Jéssica who didn't get any of the hugs and cuddles, but she got direction, even if it came from within herself. She knew what she needed to succeed, and regardless of what she had to go through, she passed the exam. So just the end result to me was very telling, and those two themes I absolutely loved.
I think, first of all, let me say it's a great metaphor that you use with the clock. It's a terrific metaphor. You're right. One wants to stop the clock and not let it move forward, and one is just definitely winding forward. That's an astute comment, and it is a comment on so much of society. People wanting to, why can't we go back to the way things were? Or why can't we
in this country, Shelley, right now?
I know. That's what I'm saying. Listen, don't make me get political.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to be judgmental.
Yeah, exactly. And the film is not judgmental because it's asking us to make what judgments we want.
Right.
It's asking us to observe and see how we feel about these things. But it's really also giving us a cultural point of view. It's showing us a culture that is dissimilar to ours in many ways, but is similar in many ways as well. We can draw the similarities out of it. Jéssica, we feel obviously got a good education from one person. As she said, he opened up their minds. She read. She makes a point of seeing a book saying, I wanted to read that book. He says, take it, read it. So she's a reader. She's curious. And even Carlos makes the comment. She says, oh, I'm not really that smart. I'm curious. And he says, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. He says to her, which is a terrific comment. But she was in that case, as far as, aspiration, very different than Fabino. You know, it does set off that contrast. We see it. Definitely, definitely. And just to get back to, you know, Susan made a comment, you know, about there's no woman coming in to look for the rich guy. Well, that was Barbara. My opinion is she hooked into Carlos because he's the one with the money. And she got, you know, because who is she? She's obviously what we would call an influencer. You know, she had some kind of show. We don't know what it was or something, or who knows what it is, but she was in it. You know, she's the woman of taste and style, you know, which was really, really drove me crazy. But the fact is that, you know, she obviously sunk her hooks into Carlos, and she was the one that was after the man. So that was that in that case, the way I looked at it. But Marilyn, terrific comments. Thank you so much. Okay, Jackie.
Well, I have a couple of things really to say, and one starts off with what I think is kind of funny, but a little bit immature. I absolutely loved how Val and her coworker, when the daughter was doing things that she didn't like, she would go behind the door and make all those faces and the talky stuff. That
Yes.
was such a comic relief. It was hysterical and so very, very real. I absolutely love
Yes.
that. But
Yes.
I don't actually see, I understand what you're saying about the class distinctions, but to be honest with you, I have a hard time with some of what we're saying because it was a job. Val worked for them. She was an employee, and you don't sit at the family table when you're an employee. You don't swim in the pool when you're an employee. So I looked at that a little bit differently, and that was part of why I didn't care for Jéssica, because that's great that she wants to bring in all these new ideas, but not in the job, not in the workforce. We've all worked for people, and you don't get to do that kind of stuff. And that was part of what really bothered me, is instead of her saying, don't accept this, mom, she was jeopardizing her mom's job. Now, if she changed her mom's opinion about what she wanted to do in the future, that's okay, but you don't jeopardize the other thing. But one thing on kind of an end note for me that I noticed was, I thought it was very interesting that as the pool drained away, everybody was changing for whatever reason. Fabino was going away, and Val was realizing it was a cyclical thing about who the second mother was. And with every foot that the pool went down, something changed until at the very end that it made a dramatic change. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way that she did that.
Yeah, that is an interesting metaphor, but to get back to your initial you know, feelings about this, again, it's a very different culture. And here they got a woman who's living with the family. She's been taken, you know, they purposely take them from a different place and inject them. And it's not, it's they make them sort of artificial members of the family. I mean, she's raising the child. The fact that she couldn't go into the pool, if she's alone with the kid and the kid wants to swim, if he's that age, she should be allowed to swim with the kid. See, using the pool as a pivotal moment in the film is, it's not just a job for her. She lives there. She inhabits their world. And you can't say to her, look, you can't swim in the pool. You can't even touch the pool. Is a little off-putting.
I understand what you're saying, Shelly, except for the fact that we live in a neighborhood where virtually everybody has nannies and au pairs. So I'm not sure that I see a whole lot of difference with that. I mean, I do see what you're saying. I just
you don't think that the nannies and the au pairs go into the swimming pool with the kid?
I don't actually
I
know
would say they do. I would say
I don't know
they
if they do or
do.
not. I just don't think they're as involved with the family as we would like to think they are. I think that they work for the family, but I just saw it a little bit differently than
Yeah,
maybe
I
some
mean,
of the other people
you're
did.
also looking at another culture. Remember, this is a culture that makes that separation very evident. You know, that you can't cross lines. They're invisible lines, and you can't cross. Now, Jéssica coming in, if you remember, Jéssica said to her mother, she thought she lived apart from the family. And she said, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to their house. I don't want to go to your boss's house. But as long as she was invited in, And they said, you're sure she could stay here, and you're invited in. And then they're taking her into the living room, and Carlos is talking to her and says, take the book, you could read it. They're admitting her into this, a past. She's slowly getting past this line. When she goes down into the room, it's like she says, and I agree with her. Why do I have to sleep on that mattress? I'm not an employee. She's not working there. She's a guest in the house. They admitted her as a guest in the house. And as a guest, she should be treated as a guest, not as subservient. As she says to Val, I am not better than these people, but I'm not worse either. I'm not worse either. And in a sense, they're treating her worse by saying, okay, yeah, I'll buy the mattress. She could sleep on the floor. I mean, that to me is terrible. You invite someone in as a guest, you treat them as a guest. And she was basically brought in as a guest. Even though she's Val's daughter, Carlos is treated like, you want to see my studio? Yes, his motives might have been a little ulterior, but he still says to her, come look at my studio. He's respectful of what she's doing, what she wants to do. He says, you do have talent. Where did you learn to draw? Like she says, I just do it. And she says, you're very talented. I think, so that line, Barbara was not going to cross that line, regardless of anything. She was just not going to cross that line. I found it reprehensible when Val brings in the coffee set to serve coffee, and she just rushes it back in and says, put it away, especially when she said the 5 minutes before, it's for a special occasion, and Val interpreted this as a special occasion. It's her birthday. So, she could have been more polite about it. She also treated her as a guest. Barbara treated her as a guest when she was sitting at the breakfast table. She came in, did you eat? Would you like something? So you got to understand that they're crossing lines. Everybody's crossing lines in this film. And she was crossing a line, and Jéssica was mainly using that. And I don't blame her for using it. At one point I thought she was going to play Carlos because of the way he was acting. She could have played him, like a 12-string guitar. I mean, she could have literally really used him, but she didn't. She realized when he hugged her, she realized, uh-oh, this is going too far. And she says, I'm sorry, and he says, no, I'm sorry. So you get this, so I didn't, and I see Jéssica representing this youthful generation as not so much entitlement, but if I'm going to be invited as a guest, then I'd like to be treated as a guest, not to be demeaned, I think, especially Fabino being in the house and making friends with her, shouldn't she be treated as a compatriot of Fabino's? If he wants to, that's why they push her into the pool. They're not even thinking about it. They're not thinking she shouldn't swim in the pool. It's Barbara that thinks she shouldn't swim in the pool. They're treating her like a friend. And therefore she's reacting like a friend. She's not thinking about it. Yes, I could swim with them. Why not? It's not, just because my mother says I can't swim, if they're inviting me to swim, I could swim. I mean, that's what we have to look at, is the reactions and the actions of the people. And that's why, and even Marilyn is saying, the film is not making the judgment. We are. So you are. We all make our judgments of who these people are and what they're doing. And I understand what you're saying. Yes, there is a working class that doesn't cross lines. I mean, if you have a plumber come into the house, no, he's not going to sit down at the table and help himself to the refrigerator. I mean, but nannies. I mean, I've had someone take care of my child when we were younger, and they were like family. I mean, they came in, they had the run of the house. And they were respectful of it. We never said to them, you can't do this, you can't do that. There was no line to cross, basically. But I think looking at that culture, it's ingrained over hundreds of years that there are these lines. There are many films that have been done Brazil, of modern directors that really deal with just the subject you're talking about, and it gets to the point where there's murder. I mean, in some of these films, when they deal with it, this is why, you know, look, they have their own slums. They have the favelas in Rio. You know, they're forced into these places, and those are the ones that come out to be the maids. They don't want to be in those places, and they have to make that sacrifice. And Jessica's got a lot of anger at her mother, which also is there because she felt abandoned. She felt abandoned, and you know, she's got to deal with that abandonment issue, which is why she keeps calling her Val. She doesn't feel like she's her mother. You know, who are you? She's trying to determine that. In the end, she realizes, and if you remember her last word in the film, Jessica's last word in the film is mother. She calls her mother. She calls her, she didn't say it all along. She calls her mother at the end, which I thought was touching. So you have, I think this is, and I understand your feelings, but I think there is, you know, we all have different feelings about these situations. So that's my take. Anything else, Jackie?
No, we just don't agree, Shelley, so that's okay.
Okay,
And that's what
that's
makes a
fine.
discussion good.
Yes. Okay, terrific.
I
Arlette?
just want to say one thing though, at the end, Jessica's father was not talking to her. Yet evidently his wife Sarah was taking care of the little boy. And all of a sudden her mother came through for her.
Yeah,
Look how that
Sandra,
diversity
Sandra,
took place.
yeah, well, her father probably wasn't talking to her for a long time, probably since she had the child.
That's right.
You know, got pregnant. So yes, that's reasonable to believe. Thank you. Marilyn?
So I'm not sure if I missed something, but it had to do with, I think it was Susan's comment about her backstory.
Yeah.
We really don't know the home that Jessica, in which she grew up with her
Right.
father and the stepmother. And we don't know that she's not closer to a higher level of whatever you want to call it, strata, than maybe she was brought up in a home that was closer to Barbara and Carlos than.
Well, brought up in a home where she was treated, you know, there was no borders to cross. There was, you know, she was brought up in a good home, possibly.
No, but maybe a more materialistic. I don't know if we could say it's a good home. A father didn't speak to her, but basically, maybe she was brought up in a home where it was higher socioeconomic stratus. So when she went to see Val, who really, I mean, did so much and gave up so much of her life for this, and that's a whole other story. But when she went from that level, yes, she was disrespectful when she got, and I believe, I agree with Jackie, she was totally disrespectful, which is not, you know, you can't say that's a good thing. She really was that way. But if she came from a home that was higher, it would be very hard for her now to live the life of a maid.
No, absolutely. She wasn't her determination was never to live the life of a maid. I mean, she was educated up to the point of going to university. She wanted to be further educated. She wanted to be an architect. She had an ambition. She had
to be brought up in a home that had a higher level of whatever.
Maybe not.
Know.
We've seen but we've seen situations where children from poverty-stricken areas or villages are influenced by a teacher. You know, where a teacher has a tremendous amount of influence because the parents don't. Okay, so we don't know, but she made it a point of saying how much this teacher influenced her life.
Well, that could have been the different. Okay.
So that's the way we have to read it. I mean, within the context of the film. And I don't know, you know, we look at it as, I saw her as disrespectful to Val. Okay. because Val, she doesn't know who Val is. She didn't feel like she was her mother at this point. She didn't know how to treat her. She felt like Val was being disrespected because of the position she was in. And I think that created an anger that she, that came out at Val. But when they said to her, when Carlos is to have lunch with me, what is she going to say? No. I mean, I think the standoff between her and Barbara was evident. I think Barbara looked down on her, and she didn't want to be looked down on. So I look at it as defiance more than disrespect.
And yet Val did not feel any of this.
No, and she didn't.
Val felt nothing of this. So Jéssica was borrowing Val's problem and making it her own.
In a sense, yes, absolutely. She became a surrogate for Val but in terms of voice, she became a surrogate for Val. Not just for herself, but also for Val.
It wasn't Val's problem.
And she said, you can't accept everything they say or do to you. Yeah.
Especially when Barbara says to Val, "Oh, you're like family." We've heard that line very, very often.
Exactly. Thank you, Aulette. Sandra, Fuss, and then Barbara.
Number one, I kind of felt that maybe Barbara came from a lower class and married up when she married Dr. Carlos. I wondered what kind of a doctor he was.
Well, I think they use that. That's a term of respect in certain societies.
Okay.
You're not necessarily a doctor, but they call you doctor. So we don't know if he was a doctor. He was a doctor of inanity. Anyway, it's okay.
I always thought that. I also decided that the guy that influenced her was probably the father of the baby, but that doesn't matter.
That's an interesting question. You bring up an interesting point.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of, how this guy changed her life, but he changed it in different ways.
Yeah, he gave her a number of gifts. Yes.
And I love the character of Val because, I mean, yes, she was a maid, but she knew her place. She knew the lines. You don't cross the lines and the conflict. I thought it was interesting. You're just the way you are. It's hard to change who you are. And I just thought she was brilliant, Val. Her role. Anyways.
Yeah.
There was something that I forget.
That's all right. But you made a very interesting comment about her teacher. I think that's terrific. It injects a thought into the whole process.
Yeah, that occurred to me right away watching the film.
Interesting.
Yeah. And of course, Jéssica was going to object. I mean, otherwise,
she was
the movie.
Yeah, she was the powerful force of change. That's what she represented.
Was the in between the old way, the mother, and the snobby parents.
Right, and the new generation.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. Kate.
I agree with Jackie and her vision. And I grew up in I spent my teenage years in a Latin country. Everybody had a maid. Didn't have to be rich to have a maid.
Right.
You had two maids. They were never part of the family. You told them you loved them in this. They stayed in the kitchen. They didn't bring the family to visit. They didn't go and eat the ice cream.
But she didn't. She didn't.
No. She knew how to behave. Val knew how to behave within those parameters, and the kid was young and in a different mindset. And I think that happened everywhere. That young women whose mothers were maids said, "That's not what I'm going to do."
She had the ice cream.
I don't see that. When they say, "Oh, you're part of my family," no, you're not.
No. Well, certainly Jessica
Did they
wasn't
love
part
her?
of their
No, you know,
family.
do you
All
want
I'm
more money?
saying,
Well,
yeah.
you'll stay if we give you a raise.
yeah, well, I'm not dealing with Val at that point. We're talking about Jessica. And Jessica was a guest in that house.
Got the voice on.
She wasn't a maid. She wasn't there as a
I
maid.
didn't consider Jessica a guest in the house. I considered Jessica as a personal favorite to Val. They would let her stay because of their relationship with Val. I
Well, what
don't
are they
think
supposed to
that
do, lock
Barbara
her in a
considered
room?
her a guest in the house.
Yeah,
And
but
I
what
think
are
the
they-
husband
was
had,
gonna
you know,
stay.
eyes.
Well, wait a minute. You're saying that, okay, she could stay here, but she has to confine herself to her room?
I think that was the original plan. Yeah, you stay there where the maids are.
I
And
didn't think
not,
she
not
was
come
going to
I
stay.
upstairs,
don't
not even
think
deal
that
with
she
the
was
house?
supposed to be upstairs at all. And I
Well,
think
that's,
Barbara was
to me,
forced into
that
accepting it.
well, I think
I
if
didn't
I were brought
consider
into
her a
that
guest.
situation, I'd be mad.
I thought Barbara
I
thought
think
she
she didn't
wasn't
know
going to
her
stay.
place.
Well, I think that she, not a matter of knowing her place, it's a matter of where she asked not to be there, first of all. And when she was brought in, her defiance, I mean, she
She
was
didn't
defiant.
expect to be there.
Yeah,
But
she was
that was not
defiant.
clear where she was going to be. She was just surprised that the mother lived there.
Yeah,
But
she was. She said, I don't want to go there. She said, I really don't want to go
people,
there. And then she
I know
realized that she lived
there's
there.
always a house in these Latin houses. There's always a room that's for the maid.
Yeah,
or a
well,
little
yes, that's
suite or
understood.
something.
That's what we see, and that's understood. So yes, they lived in the house. But there's a certain, look, she's the maid. She's the maid. Jessica's not the maid. We have to
She's a
make that
maid's
clear.
daughter
She may be the maid's daughter, but she's a human
and
being.
not a guest.
She's a human being. Okay?
Not
And
a
you treat a
guest.
human being like a human being, regardless of what you're saying. She's the
Bought her a
daughter.
new
She's not a
mattress.
maid. She's not a
He
hired
bought her a new
hand.
mattress.
What?
think
No,
this
has been one of the-
I'm
bought her a new
sorry.
mattress.
I feel bad that you think this way because
think
she's a
this has
human
been one
being.
of the
She
most
should be
it so
treated like a
many
human
times.
being.
I've
discussions we've
seen it.
had.
What?
This has been one of the most exciting discussions I think we've
Yeah,
ever
because
had. Certainly for
first
the
of
rep.
all, I don't understand. I understand how you feel. I don't understand how you think that Jessica's you shouldn't be treated like a human being. She's a young
yes,
girl.
but not a guest in the house.
Well, if she's not a guest in the house, then they should throw her out of the house. I mean, she doesn't belong there.
Stay with your mother in the brand new mattress I bought you.
No, I don't
It was supposed
agree.
to be
I think
very
that's
short
terrible.
term.
I think
It
that's a
was supposed
terrible
to be a day or
attitude.
two.
I mean, if I had a maid, she asked me if my kid can stay here, I wouldn't confine the kid to somewhere. I would talk to the kid and want to know who the kid was and treat the kid like a guest because
Good for
that's who
you.
the kid is. They're a human being. These are human beings. That's what's wrong with that system. You are pointing
didn't
out
say
just
the
what's
system
wrong with
was
that
right.
system. You just pointed out what's wrong with the system, with any system like that, is that if you have an employee and you let them bring their child into the house and then you're going to treat the child like an employee, that's wrong.
I'm
That's
not saying
wrong.
it's not wrong. I'm just saying that's
Okay.
the way it is.
That's
in
the
those
Well,
custom.
that
countries
shouldn't
with
be the
maids.
way it is. That's the point of the film. It shouldn't be the way it is. That's the point of the film.
So on
So
that
we
note,
understand why this creates this question. If you think that you can't think that Jessica is a bad person because of the way she behaves, we have to understand why she has this defiance, why she was taught that the world shouldn't be that way. And so she's not going to act that way. We have to understand her character.
Yeah,
It's
but
not a
I have
bad
to agree
character.
with her. Barbara did say, I'll pay for the mattress for your daughter to stay
Big
here.
deal. Big deal. Yes, and she told them where the mattress has to
That's
go.
it.
Because
Mhm.
it's Val that said, I'll buy a mattress.
Right,
Maybe if
exactly.
she didn't say, I'll buy a mattress, they would have said she could stay in the guest room.
Right.
I doubt it, but
The
I
higher
think,
the
it's a
get, the
possibility.
higher the caste system, the more it is what Barbara and Jackie are saying.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
India, the England, where the caste system is very strong. Yeah.
It's very rigid. It's very rigid. It's rigid and it's
All right,
wrong.
Jackie.
It's rigid and it's wrong.
So
And
I
that's the
think-
Well,
point.
that's being judgmental.
Well, judgmental, we know it's wrong.
So on that note, discussing
Yeah,
the
we have
caste
to stop.
system, maybe we should let Shelley talk about our next film. Shelley, this has been a really exciting discussion. Thank you for everybody who participated. Of
It's
course, we're a
fine.
little
It's just-
overtime. So maybe
it's-
we can discuss what we have coming up in a couple of weeks.
Right.
In a couple of weeks.
What's the
Oh,
next
okay.
one?
The next one is we're going to India.
For the official
Yay.
story.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Talk
no, I'm
about
sorry. Yes,
caste
we're still in
system.
South America. Yeah, I'm thinking we were ending April already.
Oh,
Yes, we're
no,
in
no,
South
we're
America.
still in
The
April.
next film is Argentina. We're still in
Yeah.
South America, and it is the official story, which was an Academy Award winner back in the 80s. Has a wonderful star at its center, and it's the story of a couple. Again, an upper middle class couple in Argentina, and it's during the military dictatorship when people were disappearing, what they called disappearances. People were being tortured, they were being imprisoned, and the wife can't have a child, and they adopt a child, and when she's a teacher. She's a lovely person and she's a lovely mother, but what comes into question is where did the child come from? Where did the child come from? And this becomes the source of the drama, It's a wonderful film that really expresses this period in time. Again, how both sides felt, the oppressed versus the oppressors. It deals with this situation during as I said, a military dictatorship or a dictatorship in and of itself. So I look forward to that film, of which I think you'll be very understanding of the wrongfulness of the system. But the point is, I'm not disagreeing with your feelings about this thing, but understand the system is wrong. The system is wrong. It doesn't work. And we see it, that it didn't work. It doesn't work. And if we accept it, it's a wrongful system. It's denying a certain humanity in people. And I think it's very important to understand the humanity and why they react a certain way, to take into effect why people react different ways. And that's what I think the film does. So
What's
on
the
that
title of the
note,
next, what's the title of the next film?
the
title?
official story,
Mhm. My aunt and uncle lived through that in Argentina.
Uh-huh.
Be
And
interesting.
And it will
movie.
be the 24th of April,
That's-
guys.
That's exactly, I was gonna say, it's the
Another
24th,
2
everybody.
weeks.
Mhm.
All right, we gotta leave. We're
Everybody
way
have a
way
great
over
2
time.
weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
Take care,
everybody,
everyone.
for a wonderful discussion. It was
Oh,
great.
yeah.
I can't wait to see you next time, buddy.
Okay,
Bye.
take care, Jackie, Larry. Take care, everybody.
Oh.